Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Navina Karusala. I'm a PhD student at the University of Washington. My pronouns are she or they. I've been volunteering for the past couple of years on the SIGCHI Development Fund Committee, mainly working on the Gary Marston Travel Awards, which serve to iterate upon the previous array of travel awards SIGCHI offered. And I did this work alongside another student volunteer, Vikram Kamath, and also Luigi De Rusis and Neha Kumar. Luigi, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, hi everybody. I am Luigi De Rusis. I am an assistant professor in Politecnico di Torino, Northern Italy, and I am for the executive committee of SIGCHI, the adjunct chair for community support. So basically overseeing all the community support initiative, including the Gary Marsden Travel Award and the Development Fund. And I worked with Navina when Neha was the VP at large for Gary Marsden Travel Awards and the Development Fund. And now with her, we are planning to start this new committee that is featuring SIGCHI, so the Featuring SIGCHI Committee, for which this open session, this one of today and the other one that is coming into 3 days, are a little bit the starting point, the starting conversation towards that goal of a committee for, let's say, new ideas, new pilot project that could be a public facing and pilot project for futuring, for SIGCHI futures and for HCI futures as well. And finally, my pronouns are he, him.
Thanks, Luigi. So yes, we're here as part of SIGCHI's 40th anniversary, and today will be all about reflecting on the past, how we've come here, as well as thinking about our future aspirations for the HCI community, as Luigi said, to inform the workings of the Futuring SIGCHI committee. And the focus of that committee will really be twofold. So one will be to bring researchers and practitioners together to create a close-knit community to support each other and interact with one another. And that will, and this community will offer the opportunity to lead impactful and creative initiatives that prefigure desired futures in HCI. And so the reason that this aligns well with what we want to do today, looking to the past, would ensure that the Futuring SIGCHI committee is building on existing efforts and SIGCHI members' already rich knowledge of how we built this community in the first place. And we also want to envision futures where fresh creative energy could have the most impact. Coming from my experience working on the Gary Marsden Travel Awards, both of these were absolutely essential to doing that work. And I think creating any community infrastructure, a central question in iterating on the travel awards was how much do we know about the community's needs and the real experiences in the HCI community, and how can we be responsive to them now and in the future. And I'd like to very quickly walk you through our process, which might give you a taste of the kind of knowledge that we want to capture in this session and that will be needed for the types of projects that the Futuring SIGCHI committee will work on. So if I can just quickly share my screen. This is visible to everyone? Okay. So this was a 2-year-long project at this point. So we had started in June 2020, surveying the community, wanting to understand their experiences with the existing array of travel awards. And this received almost 140 plus responses. And it allowed us to iterate on the travel awards to be a bit more responsive to community needs. So by December of that year, we were able to start supporting virtual travel as it was the height of the pandemic. And then by the next year, so we were continuing to support virtual travel and also started enlisting a travel agency, a work that is still ongoing, to support more upfront costs. And then finally, just this past month, we started supporting physical travel, which was another major iteration And along the way, these neat arrows cover up a lot of work that was happening in between these bigger milestones. So in the process, we understood a lot about community needs. So the need for flexible deadlines, supporting the burden of reimbursement, so all those upfront costs, which sometimes even required people to take out loans to attend a conference. The lack of institutional support for reference letters, which might actually, so when you're not in an institution, that might actually be when you most need to apply to the travel awards. And also the desire for things that aren't necessarily considered the core part of travel, such as visa fees, often to also be covered. We also had a lot of experience with feedback and iteration. So even after we put out the form, we, for example, discovered that there's financial need beyond people who are students and early career professionals. And so we also expanded our definition of who we support. We have also had to be very responsive to flexible, changing needs, and have had to have very flexible and compassionate policies. For example, needs due to COVID-19 precautions or economic downturns or the impact of war or the lack of visa interview slots, all of these very real experiences that impact our community. And then finally, we've had to navigate a lot of requirements around, for example, dispersing funds from the ACM, like rules from the ACM, finding workarounds to cover upfront costs, and also this ongoing work to set up the travel agency. And so to kind of further understand experiences as well as the knowledge that we have as a community in supporting in community building, we want to discuss 3 areas of impact that will be SIGCHI's current focus. So one will be community, so how members develop a sense of belonging, connect with one another, and equitably participate in the field. Hopefully you all have attended or read about or heard of the equity talks that happened last year. This was an effort to learn more and understand community needs around core issues such as sustainability, accessibility, race, gender, the futures of students and early career professionals. And the upcoming Equity SIG at CHI 2022 will also talk about what has happened since this series of talks and what is up next. The other area will be knowledge, so how we go through the process of producing knowledge and sharing it via conferences, publications, and other modes. We had an open session in late November on hybrid conferences, and there will also be a SIG on this at CHI 2022, and also a working group to focus on this issue specifically. And then finally, we'll discuss the theme of global and local participation, so how we support local chapters, regional committees, and their representation in global SIGCHI events and initiatives. And we've been developing regional committees, such as the SIGCHI Latin America Committee, and supporting local initiatives and participation through the Carrie Marston Travel Awards and the SIGCHI Development Fund. And there will be events around this at CHI 22, such as the chapters breakfast. And so these are the 3 areas where we're going to focus our brainstorming efforts on today. And let me share the document where we will be working on this. So here we'll be able to, actually before we get started and really open up the floor, I'll also go over the code of conduct. There's a link to the code of conduct for SIGCHI events. And in general, we encourage adding your pronouns if you're comfortable doing so and on Zoom, and using your camera for ease of comprehension and lip reading. And we also, in general, encourage constructive criticism and critique, but in doing so, we'll be hard on systems and soft on each other. We're all people, volunteers, and working towards the same ends, but with some very, very complicated systems. We ask that you be patient, show sensitivity to anyone speaking, be kind and be supportive. People's lived experiences are not for debate, but their ideas, policies, and suggestions maybe. And to this end, keep in mind, not everyone has access to the bodies, knowledge, or communities that you do. There are differences between us and material limits that must be respected, even if disagreed with. In general, it would be great to stay muted and raise your hand if you wish to speak and you'll be called on. And when you speak, please begin by stating your name, pronoun, and institution to accommodate anyone who might not be able to visually identify you. And feel free to take a moment to yourself whenever needed. And in the event of any harassment or discrimination, you can directly message the moderator, who will be me. And so to get started on our brainstorming session, so first we'll start with the idea of community. So, and I'll also paste this question in the chat, and feel free to both note take as well as just speak, and I will also be helping take notes. So our first question will be, how has your sense of community within HCI changed over time? What do you wish it could be like in 40 years? I guess one way to start could be to think about how did you first join the field? How did you first hear about HCI? What was your perception of it?
Maybe we can break it down to like, what is your sense of community within HCI first? Like, do you actually think we have a community? Jason?
Hi. Yes, everyone. My name is Jason Jakes. I am at City University in London, and he and him is fine. So yeah, I just thought, I'd just kind of start with that kind of suggestion that was made. When I actually sort of first started sort of getting involved in the community, actually I found it a bit of a challenge, because as a student it's often a challenge. I mean, I was a PhD student when that started, and that's often a little bit of a challenge to get to know people. And I found that from my perspective, at least, it seemed a little bit cliquey, to be honest, in that there's like little groups of people in HCI that focused on certain areas. But one thing that I really appreciate is these kind of open sessions and these kind of online engagements that we've been having recently, including the equity talks, that let people, really see each other and get to know each other outside of those groups, and in a much, well, I'm going to say cheaper way, right? In like attending conferences, for example, to meet and mix is quite expensive, and can be a challenge again as a student from my historical perspective. But these online things are much more easy to access. I'm going to stop now because I don't want to take up too much time. But thank you for that.
Susan, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Well, I have a weird experience, I suppose, because I'm sorry about the background noise. I'm in New York, where the windows are open and there's lots of noise on the street. So I was around in the very beginning, and SIGCHI and HCI were so different then, because we really were a community and we really were very tight with each other. And that's great. However, it became exclusive and it became a club. And that part of it is really not good, in my opinion. I think it's really important for us to be an inclusive and open community that's very welcoming for new people, and that provides opportunities and mentorship for everybody. I mean, I need to be mentored too, as you can ask my mentor. And so I think that my sense of community in Kai or SIGCHI is that it's changed over time in some negative ways. And what I love right now is the increasing openness and willingness to engage everybody, because I think that's what we really, really need. I'm so sorry, I forgot to mention my pronouns are she, her, and I am an independent, well, former consultant.
I think that I still find it hard, and this is me participating. I think I still find it hard to see people from different cultures, different backgrounds interacting with each other, even in these spaces. And I'm wondering how that might be possible, right? Like, yes, we've been having these virtual sessions, but I often, like, just thinking about Kai, I was wondering how many people at Kai would have like no idea of these sessions taking place, or no idea that these conversations are happening, right? Because they don't even know that SIGCHI membership is different from ECM membership, for instance, or they don't even feel the need to get any membership because they feel like they're better off not having an institutional affiliation like that. So they would just not have a clue.
Kaveh, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Kaveh speaking from Tehran. I'm an assistant professor in human-computer interaction and communication studies at the Faculty of Communication Sciences, Allame Tabatabai University in Tehran. And thank you for having me on this. I just wanted to share a personal history. Back when I was a PhD student at the University of Geneva, I remember, and to bounce back on what Susan was saying, that my PhD supervisors, and I had two supervisors, but we're saying that, you know, Kai is a club. It's very elitist, and of course you can follow what they're doing. You can read. I'm sorry, this baby is coming in, and at that time, I was just wondering what Kai is and how I can, you know, benefit from that. And nobody was saying that you can become a member. But of course, my supervisor was someone who had an ACM account, and then I could access, you know, all these papers. But even at the University of Geneva, with 500 years of history, the supervisors were not at any point saying that it's very good that you engage in the community of practice. I graduated back in 2011. I became a member of ACM SIGCHI in 2012. And 2 years later, 2014, I decided to become the founding chair of the Tehran or Iran chapter. And since then, I mean, we are doing things. So just to say that I think the way people are presenting Kai in Europe, and specifically I was talking about Geneva, Switzerland, is quite different and the way it's presented elsewhere. So what I decided afterwards was at the very, very beginning to have all these, you know, give outs that can be sent to chapters, because you can request posters and, you know, goodies and everything. There's so many people who are chapter leaders who don't know that they can ask. So there are so many things that exist, but nobody knows. Even the learning center of ACM, nobody knows. So I think there is a pedagogical work to be done. Thank you.
I didn't actually understand. Can you explain, Kaveh, what do you mean by how Kai is presented is different in Europe than it is in other parts of the world?
It was just to bounce back on what Susan was saying, that at some point Kai become a club of, some sort of elitist club of people who know themselves and interact with each other. That was what Susan was saying. And I just wanted to confirm that the perspective given to me while I was doing the PhD back in, I think, 2008, 2009, 2010. I graduated 2011 from the University of Geneva in Switzerland. It's a university with 500 years of history. So my supervisors were saying that Kai is very elitist and you would never get published there anyhow. And I even didn't knew that I could become a member of Kai. That's what I was saying. I don't know, maybe Susan can say more, but just to confirm that's the perspective that was there at that time. I don't know if it's still the case because I'm no more at the University of Geneva. Thank you.
Susan, do you want to add to that, or you just thumbs up?
I was thumbs upping, but I would like to say, I really wonder how we can change that. And that is part of why we're here. And it's also something I think we need to think long and hard about, because things are really different now. And we need to kind of let people know that. And it's very hard when people don't read emails or whatever, or the word on the street hasn't changed sufficiently. So it's frustrating to me that people think it's still like that, because it doesn't have to be, and it isn't for a lot of us.
Adriana, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I just wanted to add that this is not exclusive to Kai. I mean, it happens everywhere. Even locally, we had for a long time in the community, when the community is small and started by a few people. So you have your, founding members, and then all of the people who become new members or their students before, people who actually came from outside who were not their students or got into HCI in some roundabout way, coming from other disciplines or whatever, they often feel excluded. And this happens, and this is like, I can speak to the Brazilian community as an example, because I know that there are people who are like, oh, I'm not part of the club because I'm not from the lineage of such and such people, like 2-3 people who kind of started the region. I just wanted to add that there is one difficulty that I see, especially in many Latin American countries, and I think also Africa, and I suspect Asia, although Asia seems to be breaking through, which is the dissemination of HCI as a discipline, or the understanding or acceptance of HCI as a discipline. So you have lots of, and we still have this tension, even where the communities are a little smaller, the traditional engineering and CS, hard CS, whatever that is, communities, they kind of look at us sideways and say, why are you studying all this humanities stuff? So I think there's some, I don't know how to call it, maybe advocacy work, something where you actually have to sell it and say, no, this is actually important. And in many ways, this is more important than all this engineering thing that you're doing. Well, in my opinion, of course, but in some ways it is very relevant, because it doesn't matter how fast your software runs if it's going to be biased or whatever, if it's going to harm people, or so anyway, that's just like something I've perceived. Thanks.
Luigi?
Yes, I just want to add to what Camille, Adriana, and Susan was saying. One thing about entering the community, that is CHI or other conference, or the one thing that we sometimes, well, I don't know if we forgot, but we get from assumed is that, okay, the typical, let's say, one of the typical behavior that we think is, I have a supervisor working in HCI, and I'm a PhD student of a supervisor working in HCI, and the supervisor can tell me about CHI as the conference, about all this knowledge, this information that are not current, maybe, but still giving this information. And the other part could be, what about the people that would like to start doing something within the community of HCI? What about those PhD students that maybe are recruited to do HCI work, but doesn't have a supervisor in the community or expert in the community, or not in the lineage that Adriana were mentioning? So how can we reach out to these specific people? And I feel this, I was in that situation when I started my PhD. I work and I studied in an engineering school. We have just engineering here, and my supervisor wasn't at all within HCI, but he would like to start something, including more users, people into the research project that are engineering based. So he recruited a PhD student to do that. But from there to discovering that there is a conference at this CHI, and how hard or how easy is to enter, to publish at CHI, or to publish in all the conferences within SIGCHI, or that there exists SIGCHI that is different from CHI, etc., is a long journey. A long journey. So not only when you have maybe some supervisor that is telling you, well, it's a club, it's difficult, it's really hard, but also for when you don't have a supervisor or advisor or anybody telling you these kind of things about the community. So
I think this is a good segue to our next question, which is about knowledge production and sharing within HCI over time. So I will paste that in the chat. And so it sounds like actually a sense of community is fairly tied to how we view conferences, especially one of the biggest conferences in our field. And I think it'd be great to dig into this sense of how do you get to that, to the point of knowing that you can attend CHI, to knowing that you can participate in this type of knowledge production in this field, especially considering it is interdisciplinary, that you might need certain guidance, certain expertise to understand what is it that the people already within the field even want from me.
I could give that a go. Yeah, my name is Kagonya. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. I have, I guess, been in the CHI community for enough of some time. I know Neha and Susan from different circles. I mean, same circles in different parts of the world. So it's really been exciting to grow in this community. So I think the first part in the way of knowledge production, one thing I'm really happy about is that what we did to cater to, in fact, the problem we're talking about previously is, having these local CHIs. So in 2016, we had Africa, and we ensured that Africa would encourage the knowledge of CHI, the articulation of it, the fact that people's work, maybe if it's focused in other academic areas, it can actually qualify for CHI, etc. And that was really great. That really helped us to grow the CHI community a bit. Although it was seen as, I guess, we still have work to do, right? So we still have to, keep those associations running and ensure that African countries are well represented in CHI. I think going forward, I think we need to increase or change or catalyze the media that we use. So communicating to the community does not only mean that you take part in CHI when you go for the conference or around the conference dates. Right now, I'm not saying that CHI should be on TikTok, but I'm saying that we should think of other ways to get to these academics, right? The students and everything. I was even just looking up the presence of ACM on LinkedIn. I realized I don't even follow. So what are these other channels we can use that are being used right now for these future academics who are born in the digital age? They're born with a mobile phone on their hand. So how can academia be more relevant to them, and so that they can then, get more inculcated in engaging with the CHI community and engaging with SIGCHI in general? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we make jokes about TikTok and all of that, but I know several PhD programs have actually replaced a lot of their training in how to make like a traditional research poster with how do you make a TikTok video about your research. And that sort of shift is weird because it makes me feel very old, but I think it's been effective, and that research has been, reaching more audiences, less academic audiences, and expanding that alongside sort of what we were talking about with, like neoliberalization of university, post-secondary. We have so many more people attending now at this point that it's not really that same type of like elitist club, but a lot of the social networks begin to sort of fray, I think, at this point. And that's really tricky because it's hard to necessarily like rely on a mentor to give you the lay of the land or like how CHI works, much less how SIGCHI and supporting systems like that work. But I don't know anyone also at this point that would really sit down and maybe watch like a TikTok video on SIGCHI's governing body. So yeah, that is like a really big challenge to try and figure out.
I don't know, Kale. I mean, Casey started to do these TikTok videos and they really took off, right? And now there's like all these videos. So we need skill.
I hope I'm wrong here.
Sorry. Can I just mention that I think it's a matter of who you want to reach. So if you're using TikTok versus email versus whatever, there are different audiences that you might be reaching in each case. So I think you would have to think about that. Who are we looking to talk to? Do we want to get to the undergrads, to like people who are in engineering, and then we suddenly show them, so here's this brave new world you're unaware of? Or do we want to get to people who are already in their master's or PhD programs and tell them, hey, there's all these interesting things that you could be doing in addition to your research, or I don't know. So I think there's something to be said, about who we want to talk to, who needs to hear whatever message we want to send, and what the different messages are. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I think, we're talking about different geographies, right? So like Africa is 70% youth. So we're talking to under 30s. These are the guys who are going to be making huge decisions academically in industry, adding to knowledge. So how do we get them interested into, and how do we get them to realize what they can do, or how diverse HCI is, for example? Many people really still think that computer science is just about programming. And now at least everyone is trying to buy NFTs or create them. Do they realize that connection between having a master's in HCI, having an undergrad in HCI, or even having a PhD in HCI could help them towards that, or build systems and new worlds in the metaverse. So I just wonder how, yeah, we have to have different regions and realize that we really, in as much as, even for me, it's like, oh, how are we going to create all these short videos? It's a stress point, but we have to be aware that the world is so different, and we have to change the media for these different parts of the world. Yeah.
Can I just, so first of all, excellent point. I totally agree with you. If I try to summarize, I would say that is a matter probably of who we want to reach, what we want to say to these people, and the media for which we want to use for reaching out to these people. So yes, different part of the world, different group of people react differently to different media, be they TikTok video in 2022 or Snapchat videos 10 years ago, or whatever it was 5 years ago, or 5 years in the future, but short video, engaging videos in different languages, Susan, right? So reaching out to different, not just English, clearly. So reaching out to different people in different parts of the world, different target and with different media. So videos could be surely a way to go, shorter video, slightly longer video. Audio could be another way to go for maybe another part of the population or other regions or other goals. So it's tricky, but it's really interesting, and probably it's something that we need to reflect on, moving forwards, moving away to produce only papers, writing papers, either in email or in PDF or in web pages, but also considering other way to share these in various formats that nowadays exist and are popular and widely used. And now, Susan.
I'm just wondering if we know of any organization, scientific organization, that has actually, what do they call it? Jump the shark? I don't know what it is, but who's actually made this kind of shift, because I'm sure this is true, like Adriana said, in other organizations. And so, figuring out ways to do this has got to be something other people have had to deal with. But I don't know of any others. To any of you? Or maybe this is part of that futuring committee, their work.
Kale, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, it's drawn a local example here on like 3D6 in Canada with the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technology. A lot of approaches are relation based. So it's like community visits. It's a lot more physical. It's a lot more like going, spending time and developing those relationships first to get to know what those needs, like begin to speak similar languages. And that's kind of flipped what I think was the narrative maybe even 5-20 years ago, where it was like much more transactional and like give the thing, they'll do what they need to and figure it out. This is much more sustained, and like those relationships have to be maintained, which stresses the importance of like local chapters, regional chapters, things like that. But they've kind of gotten around a lot of differences with advertising and marketing and information distribution because those relationships are kept ongoing. And so, yeah, centering relationality is really all I needed to say, but I like to ramble on, so.
Luigi?
Yes, answering partially to Susan, the ACM had this Future of Computing Academy that started to do something in this direction. So they planned to create some videos, some materials in that direction. And they did create a podcast that was quite successful. And the ACM, from the experience of this group of young people 5 years ago, something like this, 3 years ago, created then the ACM Vibecast. So the podcast for the ACM that I don't know how much is used or popular, but it started from a pilot project from the Future of Computing Academy. And so this is one example. I don't know how much successful it is or how big it is, but it exists. And so for sure, this is possibly an area that the Futuring SIGCHI committee could focus and concentrate, especially if it's made by a good part of young researcher. The name of the podcast series is ACM Bytecast.
Karthik?
Yeah, I totally agree to what we said about the programming, like diversity in HCI part. So from my personal experience, a lot of like in India, for example, there is still less awareness about HCI, and what happens is repeatedly that sometimes when what we count as participation in a region also comes from a very set discipline. So for example, if design schools are into Kai community, so there are no like disciplinary conversations happening. So I feel that is also one thing that we like different regions, different languages, and also different disciplines. Because say if there's a like stereotype thing that okay, Kai is only for design or only for CS. So I think that is also something very important.
I think that's definitely an important thing to think about, and really connects also back to like just perceptions of HCI in general, and actually how big of an impact that has on like many dimensions of participation based on different identities, geographic locations. And this is also something that we mentioned in the previous question around so interactions among cultures, regional differences in how we need to reach out to different communities. And I think this is a good segue into the next question around how has global participation in HCI changed over time, and what do you wish it could be like? And I think we have already covered a little bit about right, like Neha mentioned, how there's not necessarily a lot of interaction, even if there might be development of local communities. At that even at that point, how do you encourage exchange, interaction amongst at the global level? Actually have thoughts on this myself. I mean, being in ICTD and like starting off thinking, I mean, I remember thinking when I my first paper I ever published, I thought like Kai was just all ICTD. I was like, this is my little world of like, this is what I thought HCI was. ICTD being a lot of work looking at global development, especially in global South countries. And then I quickly found out that was not the case. And but I think over time, even with the 5 years of my PhD, there's been a lot more work at Kai and at CSCW but at the same time, I think it's still important to look at, which institutions this work is coming from, and they might still be coming from institutions in the United States, and how can we, I guess, start from another angle of not just looking at more diverse populations in our research, but how can that research actually be coming from more diverse places as well? Susan?
I don't want to be over dominating here, but another issue I think that relates to this is how we change our field so that the diversity, both geographic and other types of diversity, are embraced. And I think that that's starting to happen. I think that young folks are really the key, and finding ways to engage and support and mentor each other, I think is really important. I know I keep coming back to mentorship, but I do believe that's an important way we can help people to grow in our field.
And just jumping onto that, do you have ideas on how we can scale mentorship? Because I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I just get overwhelmed with the requests. Like I can only mentor maybe 1 or 2 people per time. And I always wonder, how can we scale? Because I think that's a very good channel. You talk about like the one-on-one creation of relationships, because that, of course, role models are the ones who probably influence some of us to be in this field. So how do we do that? Because that, I think, could be one of the ways that we can really push for growth of the community and interest and participation.
Jason, I know you had your hand up. I don't know if it was.
Yeah, I didn't want to just distract from the mentorship discussion, because I think that's really, really important. But I was going to comment on the global participation. And as some of you know, I spend a lot of time thinking about sustainability, as in sort of ecological sustainability of conferences. And I think that these sort of local conferences like AfriChi or NordiChi, all these like localized versions, or OzChi in Australia, are a sort of a great way of building communities. But I think the problem is, for global participation, it's important that we think about how we integrate those back together and bring that information, those people back together. One of the things I think is really interesting is the moving the major CHI conference around to different parts of the globe. And I think one of the, for example, a few years ago we had it in Asia, and then moving it between the US and Europe. But I think that if we can think about, strategically about where we place it, we can encourage those local communities to be able to participate in these larger conferences, because, I don't like to focus too much on my own work, but my own work talks about how there are sort of these perennial CHI attendees, and if we can get them to essentially force them to go to these locations, then they are forced to interact with those people in those locations, right? And then it can give us the opportunity to do that sort of global community building that I hope we're looking to achieve.
Just to add here, I really like Kagonia's idea. This is something I've been toying with, but I don't know how much space we could get at CHI. So it's something that I'm hoping to talk to the global people, Global Plaza folks who will be there, how we can expand this idea of bringing in, what's going on, say what was presented at AfriChi or whatever, whatever conference, or the regional conferences. I don't know, there are lots of them. MedChi or Chi Italy, or Click or something, and bring that into the conference. But that requires a lot of conversation and negotiation, I guess, with Chi chairs. So I don't know how to do that, like off the top of my head, how we could do that. But that's definitely something I've been thinking about, and also as an incentive, and how to bring the local and regional conferences closer to Chi. So maybe you get, maybe the chairs for the local and regional conferences can write summaries to, that can be then presented as posters or whatever at Chi or something. So I think we need to try to decenter, so it's not just what's at Chi that's important, but there's stuff going on elsewhere that maybe didn't make it to Chi for whatever reason. And here's what it is, and how maybe you should be talking to each other. Thanks.
Yeah, I love that idea, because I think, honestly, yeah, you get into, we were talking about actually, I think, cross-pollination. So like greater representation of local offerings and local research. I think many sort of spotlights or highlights at larger conferences like Chi, so that the larger community is aware of that, but at the same time, yeah, still strengthens those local research communities that can stay relevant and meaningful. I'd be really curious, I don't know if now is the right time for it, but to talk about like additional strategies for doing sort of exactly that sort of thing, because whether it's mentorship or whether it's publication and awareness of like research by different locales, yeah, I think that's actually going to be a really important thing.
I also want to flag that I think a lot of these things are coming together for me as a safety issue, actually. Like, it's important to not have only one person who you can go to, who you have to rely on for knowledge, for a mentorship. I think it's incredibly valuable to be able to go to different people, get different perspectives, and especially for students, for early career people, and not have to just think about have to maintain a single relationship and do whatever it takes to do that. Any other, since we're coming up on time, any other final thoughts on this theme or any of the previous ones, any overlaps?
I like the thing that Kagonia also brought up about PDC, PDC places. Like, what would it take for Kai to do something like that? And if that's just impossible, then what can we do from the EC perspective to do that?
Kaveh?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I learned that in Germany, they're organizing the pre-Chi since 10 years. And that's really great. And I think it would be good from an EC perspective to encourage chapters to get involved in organizing pre-Chi events. And I learned that because of Albrecht Schmidt, with whom I talked, and he said that we are federating researchers who are presenting at Chi ahead of Chi, and so many people are not even aware of their fellow researchers, even in the same faculties and universities. So holding pre-Chi in Germany has helped increasing the awareness of HCI. And there's so few places that are holding this pre-Chi. So we tried, because obviously there are not so many Persian-speaking or Farsi-speaking HCI researchers, but there's few that are presenting this year's at Chi, and I've tried to get in touch, and we will be trying to get in touch in the next years in order to have some sort of Persian speaking stuff to raise awareness. So I would definitely recommend the EC to somehow learn best practices from the way Germany is doing that. Thank you.
Okay, and we're actually a little bit over time now. Thank you everyone so much for all of the comments. We will also be meeting on Monday at 11:59 p.m. UTC and continue the discussion then. We definitely recommend, or we would love for you all to apply to the Future SIGCHI Committee, and I will leave the link to the open call here.
And there's also other capacities, right? Like Futuring is one, but there's other committees too that are being set up. So if those are of more interest to you, I think some of you are in other committees, but just reach out and let us know.
And I'm also sharing about the Chi 22, a link to all of the Chi 22 events hosted by SIGCHI, and please consider attending those as well. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Navina. Thanks, Luigi.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.